Since humans have been humans, the animals around us have played a large role in culture, story, and mythology. As gods or their avatars, as good or bad omens, and as key characters in numerous narratives. So with surrounding wildlife as impressive and prevalent as the assorted monsters seen across the games, one can only wonder what role they play in culture and belief. Most of the game is of course dealt more with beating them up and wearing their skin, but through some of the snippets of the lore, we can piece together a partial picture of what people think of monsters. One of the most prevalent in and out of game is of course Rathalos and its female counterpart Rathian. Together, the two are known worldwide as the King of the Skies and the Queen of the Land, with their titles bestowed on them in quest and carve descriptions across multiple areas in multiple games, with Rathalos also sometimes getting the occasional extra moniker of a king robed in smoke. Certain animals can become very heavily associated with royalty. In our own world, the lion is associated with kingship in numerous African cultures, in Buddhism, in Christianity, and even Dante's Divine Comedy too. As such, it's viewed to be a symbol of the traits a king should be: strength, courage, generosity, and pride. Generosity seems a little hard to pin on a lion, but maybe it comes from observations of males letting their cubs feed. Overall, Rathalos and Rathian exhibit many of these same traits too, as strong, brave, and prideful beasts. Similarly, their sexual dimorphism could help them here as well. What's a king without a queen? And by having clearly defined sexes, the Raths may only make themselves model royalty even further. This is a title met with some confusion by the fanbase, when they're not the most powerful monsters. But there's more to being a king than just strength. In European folklore, there's the tale of how the wren became the king of birds. The avians decided whoever flew highest would be king, and the wren hid in the feathers of the eagle and waited for him to reach his limit, before popping out, flying above him, and winning the crown. Cunning, or rather intelligence, is a kingly trait too, and the Raths are far from stupid, and far from weak. Whilst not always accurate to their true nature, animals become their roles in society from observations of their nature and characteristics. Naturally, in humans, this leads to biases for more impressive and more diurnal animals, that overtly ooze regality. Naturally, the Raths and the lions would become the icon of kingship, and Rathalos still dominates or holds its own against many other large wyverns in its range, just as Rathian is shown not to back down from a stronger Rajang or a larger Glavenus, and even hold her own against the latter. If anything, this bravery in their reluctance to back down against a superior opponent is a better show of the traits royalty should show than the cruelty and bullying of the superior beasts like Deviljho and the Elder Dragons, who almost always punch down. So icons of kingship can also be applied to far weaker animals too. An especially fine great jaggy frill is called a king's frill, and in later games equally high quality calves of great baggy and roggy were called a king's crest and a king's beak as well. With their clearly defined roles of dominance in their packs, it's easy to see how a leader of the people could partially style themselves and/or similarly described leaders of monsters with such lofty terms too. There's also Royal Ludroth, who is given a noble description presumably stemming from his clear position as the king of his harem. This may also make them a popular choice for the human nobility too. One quest states how the aristocracy regularly keep Royal Ludroth as pets. This demand comes from the daughter of a lord, and the Raths are also captured for menageries too, albeit from princesses and kings, so perhaps royal ownership can play a role too, much like how different birds in medieval falconry were assigned to different ranks in nobility. Perhaps only kings and their families can own Raths and beasts of similar size and heritage. In some cases with lions, it's believed they were the spirits of deceased kings. In Dande village in Zimbabwe, such ancestors were known as Mondoro, and they rule over the same territories as when they were king. They also protect such lands, especially from Mashave, who manifest as spotted hyenas. Maybe something similar occurs with Rathalos and Rathian too. From the village of Kokoto, there's never been a single quest asking for someone to kill the local Raths. Rather, they come from outsiders either provoking them or demanding the hunter test their mettle. Even Dread King was described as mainly ignoring the village. So despite the fact the villagers quite literally live in the shadow of royalty, they've never once suffered an attack, and generally seem to have no complaints, even taking their eggs on occasion. Rather, their biggest complaints are Velociprey and their drome, which attack villagers directly and their cattle too. Such birdwyverns are scared of the wraths, and occasionally eaten by them as well. So maybe the local villagers have a similar view of the wraths as Dande does with its Mondoro, viewing them as local protectors of the lands keeping the prey and other predators in check. But as well as the red and green wraths, they also have their more ornate azure and pink subspecies too, also viewed through the lens of such royalty. And then there are the precious metal wraths, Silver Rathalos and Golden Rathian. With these species, the king and queen ascend from just nobility to legend. There are stories that their scales are genuinely made of gold and silver, of the Silver Rathalos attacking villages, and if the two meet, then the world may end to bring ruin to all. But as one would expect with such widespread creatures, the tales vary between cultures too. Another story is far more optimistic, and cryptically claims when celestial gold and silver meet, a new door opens. What exactly this means is unclear. Maybe it's a belief that, like some knights in mythology, gateways to alternate planes of existence open like ones between living and dead, or to another world completely. Perhaps it's more symbolic, and refers to the beginning of a new age when we pass through that now opened door. Whatever the case is, gold and silver are laden with extravagant myth and legend on a level far beyond their base counterparts. Unusually coloured animals tend to have this effect, with white sows, stags and buffalo being highly important parts of Celts, Magyar and Lakota Sioux cultures. In some cases their symbolism can be used to shelter their people through difficult times. And with the gold and silver wraths, both tales do seem to present a definitive change, a more pessimistic one of destruction, and a more optimistic one of new beginnings. Presumably the fortunes of the culture at the time and their view of the wraths themselves have some influences as to what the wyverns will bring when they meet. Other monsters and wyverns can be important symbols too. It's hardly surprising that with so many belligerent beasts in the series, that some would become visions of anger or rage. Both Monoblos and Rajang fit this description, as the heart of both is said to symbolise fury. Both monsters are pretty high-profile deals outside of this too. Monoblos is the monster that began proper and organised hunting, and one was slain by the chief of Kokoto in a week-long battle. Now to attain the title of Hero of Kokoto, a Monoblos must be slain. Rajang is a mysterious beast with a hide of gold or black coveted by royalty, and horns coveted by hunters. And that's one of the key factors that presumably led into their reputations for anger. Both are heavily desired as targets by hunters, as the ultimate quarry and the most dangerous game of all. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, as the more hunters want to take them down, the more hunters are killed by them, the more their reputation grows, and leads to more wanting the bragging rights of hunting them. There's even an in-universe saying, enrage a monster and you have a problem, provoke a Rajang and you'll leave a widow. Both Bloss wyverns are responsible for countless deaths across the games. The first one slain had crippled the original hunter of Kokoto, repelled your rival and crushed several more. And some say the red of the horn comes from the blood it spills. They may be some of the most popular targets for hunters, but for every Bloss wyvern slain, a dozen hunters were buried by it first. In the case of some like Bloodbath, it can be many more still. And from both their danger and yet frequency compared to much rarer creatures like elders, the Bloss wyverns may have the highest death toll in hunters caused by any group of monsters. So it's almost tempting to say that such reputations are undeserved initially. But both the Bloss wyverns and Rajang are famously bad-tempered monsters regardless of hunters. Rajang is just generally an asshole. But the Bloss wyverns have poor eyesight, thick skulls, and live in a world of carnivores. As such, they have a charge first, ask questions later policy, that can often result in relatively innocent bycatch for harmless wyverns like Baroth. Animals that resemble threats but pose little actual risk to the Bloss wyvern itself. And they're also very well known for fighting each other too, with both bulls and cows engaging in intraspecific combat. Diablos contests are a frequent ecology snapshot across the series. So both types of monsters will regularly be seen to be fighting other monsters, and winning more often than not too, and sometimes in a manner that results in multiple casualties for the opposition. Even if you have valid reasons for doing so, it's easy to see how this can result in a reputation of anger. In a surprising coincidence, in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, the bull and the monkey were the most common symbols of anger, and the word for monkey and anger may have been linked, as well as idioms akin to raging like a bull being present. And this isn't without reason too. Bulls are pretty commonly depicted as bad-tempered fighting animals, to the point that bullfighting became a widespread spectator blood sport that controversially still exists today. Similarly, monkeys and primates in general are pretty hostile animals to one another, often having pretty high rates of infanticide and intraspecific mortality in mammals. Other cultures took note of this too, and the Hindu deity Hanuman is a divine Vanara, either a forest-dwelling person or monkey. He had his own army of monkeys, and as a result the Hanuman langur got its name from him, with their black faces and hands believed to have come from being scorched in a burning battle. So primates and their aggression can play some role in our own myths, and so too can Rajang and the Bloss wyverns appear to play a few similar roles as well. It's unknown how many languages there are across the world of Monster Hunter, but monster names can occasionally come from other dialects than the ones spoken in-game. Rajang translates into Golden Lion. When slaying him in Iceborne, the Admiral makes reference to baboons being in Monster Hunter 2. Maybe Rajang and baboons have a similar mythological story to Hanuman and his langurs. The Bloss wyverns also have such myths regarding them in Universe 2. In desert cultures, there's the childhood legend of a giant unbeatable Diablos, who shakes the earth with every step. And this seems to be a reoccurring theme with Diablos. The first Monster Hunter art book has the individual some have since called the Crimson King, a giant red Diablos who shattered its opponent's horn. Freedom Unite has the one-horned Demon King, a Diablos with a pre-broken horn from a prior hunt that's far tougher than usual, a concept developed to its maximum in the deviant known as Bloodbath. So fiction and fact and legend and hearsay all jumble together with the repeating theme of the Super Diablos, a specimen far beyond the others of its kin in strength, aggression, appearance, or all three. This seems to be based on the occurrence of the rare, exceptionally powerful 1 in a million individuals, like the Crimson King or Bloodbath, whose stories then grow into embellished legend to become all-powerful godlike figures, taking centre stage in local mythology. It's unknown what role the assorted people of the desert play in this. We see a few rare waterside guild towns in the desert like Loch Lac, but other than a few scarce quests, we see and know little of the people who live in the interior regions of the Great Deserts. Maybe like the lion for the Maasai, taking down a Bloss wyvern is the ultimate test for them. And as a result, both species of Bloss wyvern already operate on maximum hostility long before the guild got involved. And that simply being at risk was just a part of the culture. Or maybe they let them be, and lived peacefully alongside them. Despite actually competing with them, Bloss wyverns don't attack other herbivores like Apsaros in the desert, only things that try or tried to threaten them. So in past times, maybe Bloss wyverns lived in harmony with people, and didn't attack them either, until the guild showed up and decided that hunting Bloss wyverns was cool. We see some quests are failed hunting safaris for them, as well as the established law that taking down a Bloss wyvern makes you a big deal. Perhaps the desert cultures resent the guild for this, turning their mighty predator-repelling neighbours into indiscriminately homicidal tyrants for sport, and as a result became insular and xenophobic to outsiders. As some people do dislike the guild even in canon, there's one quest caused by someone crying wolf and sending the guild on a wild goose chase. They're said to be a criminal, but it's also the guild telling you this. There's also plenty reasons one can infer as to why someone may dislike the guild and their actions. Elsewhere too, there seems to be some action to push against the status quo. There's mention of a cult that worships Anjanath, which is an interesting choice. Anjanath is a barbarian and an upstart, always picking fights and often with his superior Rathalos. But it seems this group have turned away from calling Rathalos king, to put a crown on Anjanath instead. If Rathalos is associated with kingship, and Anjanath is always trying to punch up and usurp him, maybe they were spurned by a past monarch who was a terrible king, and in an act of symbolism, turned to worship the rebel instead, viewing themselves as proud traitors to the throne and the crown for their past actions. Their gear is also made from Anjanath material too. Maybe they scavenge it, or maybe, knowing Anjanath, the best way to win their icon's approval is to take one down yourself. Anjanath only listened to and respect strength, and would have no time for anyone beneath them. Themes of rebellion and kingship also occur in other monsters too. Zinogre's carves often reference him as a monarch, and Stygians take this a step further too, stating that his crown of horns are a defiant statement of war and rebellion against dragons. This isn't without precedent in the series. With the arrival of Amatsu in the higher region of the Misty Peaks, Zinogre were displaced into the lower levels, and we see a glimpse of this in the opening to Portable Third, as a Zinogre voices its umbrage to the roiling heavens. In a more action-packed, albeit perhaps less nuanced follow-up in Sunbreak, Master Ituchi literally brings Apex Zinogre to fight Amatsu as well. So there's clear hostility between the two, and Stygian may represent a more belligerent form of Zinogre's role in the competition, in one that may now try to challenge elders. This may make it something of an aspirational role model to the people of places like Yakumo Village. Amatsu threatens them, with storms that threatened other settlements like Kimura too, and even laid cities to ruin. Even if the very strongest Zinogre stands little chance of stopping Amatsu, its willingness to hold its ground and try to defy the dragon may make it a local icon around Yakumo, hence its instated role as a rebellion monarch. Much like with the Anjanath cult, it's much more the symbol of bravery and taking a stand for what you believe is yours, often against poor odds, that makes Zinogre worthy of kingship. This isn't uncommon to see in cultures that live alongside powerful animals that embody traits people want. In South and Central America, jaguars are often idolized as a similarly aspirational figure for the masculine ideal of a carnivorous provider, contributing to a view of a heroic self-image that commands fear and respect. A carnivore is important for this role too. It symbolizes the victory as a provider to satiate the meat hunger, present in many hunter-gatherer cultures. So for the people of Yakumo, Zinogre and his association with them provides a symbolic stance against the likes of Amatsu as well. This may also partly explain the monster armor too. There are basic Watsonian and Doylist reasons for wearing monster hide in parts as armor, but in the context of certain lands or cultures, some armors may take on a much more symbolic value depending on the fight and circumstance. Yakumo hunters may dress as Zinogre for high-profile fights or elder dragons, to embody Zinogre's rebellion against higher powers in them. And all across the globe, different monsters and the armor from them may have key roles in different cultures. But Zinogre's efforts will always be something of an aspirational tragedy. As with some elders and monsters of equivalent strength, they're viewed as gods. There's a reference to Shagaru Magala being as such, with people openly calling it a god, and its influencing of the cycle of life and death. Other myths surrounding it believe it can travel in time too, perhaps referencing the great spans between Shagaru emergencies that, when combined with its rarity, power, and belief as a deity, may lead people to believe there's only ever been one unstoppable Shagaru, travelling between different points in time. And to be fair, this isn't exactly an unreasonable take. Shagaru is powerful, looks like a glowing angel star dragon, and follows a tsunami of death and destruction after the dragon rabies epidemic caused by its juvenile state. You can't really ask for more in that regard. Its lack of presence in living memory due to the infrequency of emergence, but strong presence in myth, would also naturally lead to exaggeration too. But overall, unlike other legends in the pantheon, Shagaru is universally bad news whichever way you slice it. Beasts even more powerful than Shagaru can claw out such titles too, and Akantor and Yukonlos are known as the Black and White Gods. The word Akantor wasn't actually made to describe the species, but comes from the poke word for calamity. Maybe this was just developed as Akantor was discovered by following in its wreckage. Or maybe it's like how in some cultures the true names of powerful beings have to be avoided. Using it may result in the detection of the user, or due to being part of a pantheon of gods, gives them greater power to harm the user. Indo-European cultures used to call bears honey-eaters, and wolves grey ones, to avoid similar fates. Maybe Akantor does have a true name, one of many, and we just won't hear it in the series. Even the guild, with no jurisdiction in that area, still use the poke term to describe it. The last thing anyone wants to do is summon an Akantor. Other lore tidbits seem to hint at some creationist tale of the Monster Hunter world, involving the Black and White gods too. In myth, Akantor was apparently the ancient world king, and had dominion over all. Yukonlos seemed to be of equal power, and is credited with attempting to destroy the world. So whatever role they play in their respective or shared pantheons, it's likely not a positive one. Akantor's role as the Black God and Tyrant of Fire may place him in opposition to other gods too, and ones mentioned in multiple generations are the gods of fire. One quest has a princess about to be sacrificed to Uragan and Agnaktor, similarly to try and appease the gods in response to excessive eruptions. Another quest has a presumably different princess bemoaning the arrival of a Brachydios, fearing the fire god has forsaken her and her people. So it seems in mythology the fire god assumes something of a protector role, keeping the hazardous features of the volcano at bay unless angered or disappointed by their subjects, at which point they may send forth disaster. So some gods in Monster Hunter are like Greek or Roman ones, capricious and somewhat uncaring deities that you exist under and do your best to appease, but can ultimately be smited by at any second on a whim. The various wyverns of the volcano could be viewed as their avatars, an easy belief to form considering ones like Gravios and Agnaktor emerge from the rock and magma, appearing to be created by the volcano in a second, with his diet comprised mainly of other volcanic-dwelling wyverns, and his insane power in overwhelming them. This could have been one thing to lead Akantor further into the realm of myth. Maybe Akantor is part of the same pantheon, trying to overwhelm the fire god and usurp the world once more. But not all deities are hostile or indifferent. Ceadeus has considerable importance to the sea peoples of Monster Hunter, and to Tri's storyline. The Japanese title translated to Dragon Emperor of the Sea, which it ruled with unparalleled authority. But even more than that, it had the connotations of the first king of humankind. The idea of Ceadeus being this eternal grandfather figure to the sea peoples is further shown in the description of its horns, formed over ages and said to evince all weight of history. Ceadeus are presumably rare, and due to the length of their dives and the span of the oceans, seen rarer still. Thus any sighting of the sea god is treated as an event, and possibly the beginning of a new era. The tail of a Ceadeus is said to symbolize peace, and with how Ceadeus surface and submerge again, the tail is the last thing seen as they disappear beneath the waves again. For the sea peoples, such a rare and holy event is a sign. Village feuds and wars and family squabbles are to be dropped at the sign of the Great King, and in doing so, his signs save them from self-destruction, and bring about a new era of unity instead. This also links directly with Tri's story and final quest. Ceadeus horns grow continuously, and can sometimes cause them pain. By breaking the horn that carries the history, Ceadeus is free, and the bad blood between Moga and the Ceadeus is now forgotten. Now, the horn can grow anew to record the next chapter of history, and this new peace between them. Accordingly, the last thing we see of Ceidius before the credits roll is his tail, as he ushers in a new era of peace for Moga Village. As well as gods and kings, monsters can be considered omens too. Whilst this isn't uncommon, and plenty animals can often suffer at the hands of unfortunate cultural beliefs, often tarring them of crimes they don't commit, in the world of Monster Hunter these are generally a lot more spot on. Monsters like Deviljho, Valstrax and Gormagala are said to be omens of ill fortune. Bad luck surrounds even their hides and scales. Deviljho and Valstrax materials are used in shady rituals, and some people even refuse to work with gore hides for fear of catching frenzy. Considering Gormagala is a walking biological weapons factory, Deviljho spends most of its life trying to eat everything around it, and Valstrax just crashes into and sets things on fire at random, it's questionable whether such descriptions can be counted as proper omens, when they're essentially fact to the impacts monsters have on those they come into contact with. Nothing good really comes from the arrival of either monster, and you can't really detach the misfortune from the beast. We could even fancifully suggest Valstrax is the opposite to Ceidius. As one rises from the depths to bring peace, another streaks across the sky as a red comet to bring war. But again, it's not all negative. Some elder materials can have the opposite effect, and Chameleos hide is apparently meant to have a calming influence on those who touch it. It's not clear as to what role Chameleos plays in myth or culture, but it already seems like it's a more positive one than other elders. Smaller animals can bring good fortune too. A high-quality Yan Kutku ear is said to be the symbol of good luck. Kutku undergo partial migrations, and as invertebrate specialists presumably can't stay too long in areas without good supplies of large neopterans like Vespoid, Conchu and Hornitors. When going is good, their numbers also increase drastically. Given the high numbers of such prey in areas like rainforests, rainfall may be a key factor in Kutku's food, and so their own numbers too. So Kutku themselves may become indicators of bountiful harvests from good rainfall that year, or maybe from them eating a lot of the crop pests. Thus, despite their occasional danger to people, Kutku may be a lot more tolerated than other animals of their rank, due to being viewed in a positive light for the most part. Some quests from the villagers don't ask the hunter to destroy the Kutku, but rather to go out into the wilds for them to gather what they need as the better armed individual. Gemma also has a Kutku plushie too. It's not uncommon for birds, due to the migratory or seasonal breeding status, to become associated with seasons, and especially periods of high rainfall. Cuckoos and cuckolds can sometimes be called rainbirds, with the former arriving in the wet season to breed, and both beginning mating calls at the start of the rains. Similarly, ground hornbills are sometimes known as thunderbirds, and are given immunity by Zulu culture because it's believed if one is killed, thunder strikes the area, and its family may bring storms as vengeance. So whilst Kutku are still occasionally hunted, and are often a hunter's first real hunt, considering their numbers and fairly good reputation, they may get off fairly lightly compared to a lot of other monsters. In some cases, reputation may have the opposite effect, and lead to increased demand. One quest describes someone hunting a Barioth chiefly for the challenge, wanting to test their skills against the Sub-Zero White Knight. Barioth is seemingly called as such in Universe 2, which is surprising considering its role as an ambush predator and a messy eater, which would surely strike a contrast to ideals of chivalry and honour in knighthood. What decency is there in sneaking up on an opponent to bury your fangs in their back and your face in their entrails? Maybe a tracked and cornered Barioth is just such a thrilling fight they're considered high sport for the gentry. After all, this quest also comes from a knight too. Barioth's calves may have also inadvertently increased its own social standing too, and their fur is among the most coveted of all. A Barioth outfit is used by the nobility to express authority, and their incredibly high-grade material may have backwashed into the monster to make them royal game, essentially, also granting Barioth their own title. And it should be noted, Barioth fur is exceptional. Blangonga is soft, Lagombi is softer, and the best Barioth fur is like being wrapped in the wings of an angel. And this is another way monsters can enter public thoughts and culture, through their materials and importance of such. Fashion hunting does actually seem to be a thing in universe as well. Some are just because of the bright or attractive colours that are thought to look cool, like purple Gypsaros or Quechua. But some of them may have a deeper meaning too. White scale and shell are popular among female hunters, although it's not clear why. In our own world, wearing white had or often has connotations of purity and innocence. So maybe that applies here too. Or it could be to boast as well. Stains and scratches would show up even more on white. So to wear the most easily spoiled armour in spotless condition after numerous hunts is a flex in itself. In some cultures, white can also be used to symbolise death too. So maybe dressing in white is a billboard of your own success and lethality as a hunter. This can reach surprising levels too. Despite the presumably tough and hard-wearing nature of Lagiacrus pieces, their claws aren't favoured for gear. Not because of any weakness, but because they're not good-looking enough. Whereas the unimpressive and barely functional horns are highly coveted for their seemingly perceived power. Certain parts and pieces can vary a lot depending on where they're sold. Agnacta pieces are worth very little in Moga, and why should they be? What use are lava-proof scales for sea people, or a tail poorly designed to paddle for a boat? As this doesn't stop at hunters either. Monsters and their parts can play a similar role in traditional garments and apparel for assorted villages too. The horn of a Bishaten is believed to make you smarter when worn, and the tails of Mitsutsune are eagerly sought after for their use in dances too. In many animals this can lead to humans posing as threats through overuse, but happily the creatures of Monster Hunter aren't likely to be threatened by hopeful villagers anytime soon. But monsters can still play a big role in just the day-to-day life too, and not just when wreaking havoc. Monster parts can still have a myriad of uses and be excellent quality material. Both types of Celtus gossamer literally have a myriad of uses. Iopre hide makes for fine quality leather, and Karapico feathers are used by salesmen to craft souvenirs for Moga visitors. In short, there's a world to monsters outside of just the damage they can cause and their roles in remote ecosystems too. Many villagers live directly within their territories. Man and beast serve as neighbours to one another and have done for millennia. So it should be no surprise that as such iconic beasts, they have a huge role to play from top to bottom in human cultures too. This video was initially one I was a bit hesitant about, as I wasn't sure there'd be enough information to work with. And though some points did get repeated, overall it turned out there was quite a lot to say. Most of the stuff here is canonical, with the direct quotes, although in the script there's some joining of the dots and embellishment by me too. Despite the amount of lore there already is, it's really something I'd like to see developed more in Monster Hunter games, and for it to be baked more directly into the story and dialogue too, over just carve and quest descriptions. The aspect of just normal people can feel like it's missing from newer games, I feel. As mainline games continue to get more and more AAA and blockbuster in scope and presentation, this often involves more colonial travelogue narratives of exploring new worlds and places, over the more condensed village hero aspect the series used to have, thus meaning we don't really get to see what the non-hunter people see or think of things. Portable does now maintain the village hero aspect, although unfortunately it doesn't really pick up the slack in this regard as much as I'd like, as overall in both, the guild and its reach has always felt a lot more prevalent in newer games from 4th gen onwards. It feels like almost everyone's employed by them, and you barely ever get random villagers who are just farmers or merchants or such. As well developed as the world and its ecology are, the big thing that it now feels like it's missing and has been left behind are just the normal people. their day-to-day lives and how the monsters interact with them on both a literal and cultural level outside of just terror. The world of Monster Hunter can feel wildly alive outside the village, and barely existent inside them at times. With the desire for the series to grow its narrative and story side as well, I think developing this aspect of the games would only help a lot in that regard, as well as continuing to flesh out the world building. Thanks for watching, and thanks as ever to my patrons, especially top patron Sar, as well as the Super Stupa, Samburgo, K-Sandom, Holden, Octavia of the Fifth Fleet, Nickname 3110, Erengar Steiny, Kieran McCarthy, Flygon's Archives, Hui Hui, Jabin, Dapperaptor, Original Username, Evilly, Archosaur Queen, Tommy Choi, Jacob Wilcox, Seth Fake Last Name, Zesa, Dodecablos, and Bazugazu Bakumatsu for their ongoing generosity keeping the channel going. If you did like this video, then please do like and subscribe and share with others you think may also enjoy it. I'm glad everyone enjoyed the last video, and hopefully everyone will enjoy this one too. The broader topics in Monster Hunter are generally videos that I try to use to explore things that are a little less on brand for me, like things that may still be in ecology but are too broad for a species-specific profile, or topics in theme or design in the series. So like with last time, if you can think of any further topics that you might like to see, don't hesitate to suggest them in the comments down below. They may not all necessarily get made into a future video, but they definitely may influence ideas I have for future ones, or become smaller parts of larger videos. So be sure to keep watching to see what other content is made.